Hey, ESVN, it's Drew from Vegas.
Drew from Vegas. We're just talking about Vegas. What's on your mind?
I wanted to talk about just kind of the sports betting industry. So just as a reminder, I actually work as basically a bookie for a pretty
Yes, I
big online
remember.
sports book. Um, there's a lot of stuff. It's not necessarily like secret or it's not hidden, but just in the way sports betting works, it's very, let's just say, non-consumer friendly. So I wanted to kind of talk about a couple of those things so if anybody's betting, they can just kind of be aware.
Sure.
And then talk about some of the problems, I think, with the growth of it and how the consumer is being severely screwed over, let's just say.
Go ahead.
So the two biggest things I think that are a problem that are, again, perfectly legal, which is, again, part of the problem. The two biggest things that the average sports bettor just doesn't know about are the hold, right? So the hold in sports betting is essentially the tax that the bookies take on your bet, right? So when you have team A versus team B, right, the probability that one of them wins is 100%, right? Let's just say team A is 60% and team B is 40%. When you look at sports betting, you'll notice if you do some math, and that's where the problem comes in, is that probability adds up to like 105%, meaning the 5% is what the book takes off your bet. So no matter what happens, when you add those numbers up, the book is going to take 5%. Now, that's not a problem per se and is reasonable because they're kind of they're funding the bets, so to speak.
Right.
But the problem is those holds are not regulated in any way, shape, or form. And the more complicated things get, the bigger the holds get. So, for instance, when you take just two teams, the hold's not going to be too bad and is relatively fair because there's a lot of competition. It'll be 2-3%. But when you start looking at things like who's going to win the Super Bowl, and there's 32 possible options, the odds look really good. You say, oh, man, I get 4-1 on my money, or I get 5-1 on my money. But when you add up all the probabilities, it adds up sometimes to 140, 150%, meaning there's a 50% hold, which is outrageous.
Well, I
And
mean, they do this
the
with same
bet,
game parlays too, by the way. Like
oh, they're so bad.
that's
Oh, so
ridiculous.
bad on
You
that.
know, if
So
I
bad.
like to bet on hockey, right? And like if I want to pick, the Maple Leafs to win and the over to be over 6.5 goals. Like the math does not add up in that parlay in the way that I feel like in the odds a few years or two ago when it was just in New Jersey, the odds were a little bit better. But as these apps are getting bigger, correct me if I'm wrong, I've noticed the odds getting worse.
No doubt. No
Okay.
doubt. And they know that no one's going to do the math. No one's going to like the professionals will. Like if you're a professional sports bettor, you'll do the math and you'll go, "Oh, this is insane. I'm not going to bet it." But they don't make their money on those guys. They make their money on the people who don't do the math, and like you can't reasonably be expected to when you're just trying to make a bet for fun. It's
Right.
not going to happen, and they know that, and there's no way on earth it shouldn't be regulated. And it's not ever, well, I want to say ever.
Well, that's the
I'll be somewhat
thing.
optimistic, but it won't be.
You don't think it will? I mean, eventually though,
No.
there's gonna be issue. I think we said this last time, Andrew. Right? That's your name, right? I'm sorry.
Yeah, yes. Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to make sure. When we
No, good.
discuss, when we talked about this last time, are th- is the will regulation come as there becomes more and more synergy, shall we say, with professional leagues, which are, the NFL has an antitrust exemption because of the union, right? And that's a little tentative, right? There is an added, in theory, legal scrutiny to them because they're 32 corporations operating in a like larger umbrella corporation that has a chokehold on professional football, for example. So they have antitrust thorny things that can be picked apart. Is there hope in that way?
I mean, yeah, I always want to say there's hope. The problem is when you look at, this mass, it's kind of brand new in theory, right?
Right.
Like the regulations being put out. Like there's not a good, I mean, Vegas is, I guess, having been the longest legalized, right? I guess they kind of set the tone, but the sports books and the casinos run the town. So they write the legislation. And you're seeing that every time it enters in a new state, the sports books are writing the legislations, right? And it's akin in a way to tech, where I want to say the people writing the laws don't know what to regulate, right? And there's no, so like, it's like when you were to ask some of these lawmakers about holds and probabilities, it would be like what they sound like trying to talk about TikTok and Facebook. They have no idea. And the sports books come in, write the laws, and have them passed. And then once they're passed, they get replicated in new states, and the momentum goes on. And what I kind of mentioned in the beginning, and it's actually kind of akin to what you were talking about with the Eckler situation in a way, is the consumers, right, need a union, so to speak, or at least some consumer, advocacy. But the people who are the biggest, loudest advocates are professional bettors, and their needs are wildly different, and the things they would advocate for are wildly different than what the average sports bettor would benefit from, right? Yeah. So, like, the biggest problems pros have is being able to get down a lot of money. They want to bet $50,000, $100,000 at a time, and they get limited. That's not a big deal for somebody who only bets $10, $20 at a time.
Yeah, I don't care about that at all.
Yeah, it doesn't. But I promise you, if
also,
there were some advocacy group, that would be the number one thing they would advocate.
But that's hilarious, because those kinds of sports bettors are they doing it on DraftKings on their, whatever, DraftKings, FanDuel, BetMGM? Aren't they just working with like big time bookies? Anyway?
Yes, but the problem is the odds are softer on those books, so they kind of get around those things. Like, they have a ton of accounts, so they just pay people to open accounts, and then they're betting through 50 accounts and such. So they are, but like in a way it doesn't matter, because like if there were some kind of consumer advocacy, it would largely cater to those people anyway, regardless. Yes. That would be the number one thing they would want. So like that's a huge, in my opinion, it's the biggest problem, is that even if there were consumer advocates, they wouldn't be advocating for most people. They would be advocating for the most successful. It's like how the union caters to quarterbacks and the running backs get screwed.
Well, and it's also
a very
just
kind of similar problem.
A regulator is going to be like, well, price of doing business.
Yeah,
cost of doing business,
exactly.
Yeah.
And there's kind of, I think also the problem is it's still seen as dirty. Mm-hmm. It's still seen as underground, and people who bet are gross and that kind of stuff. And so there's just kind of even less, people looking out for them, because it's just still kind of seen as, an underground, shady, kind of thing. And it's obviously super popular. You see ads everywhere. So It's super problematic. And like, it sucks. Cause it's so, in my opinion, it helped. I've learned data science. I've learned probabilities. I've learned super cool stuff from working through this kind of thing. But then at the end of the day, you're like, man, this feels so gross sometimes.
Yeah.
And it can't not, So I would say, like, as a couple things for people to look out for if you want to bet, which I think is fun and I think is cool and certainly adds fun to a game you're watching. The two things I would watch out for are the hold. So again, as a quick thing, if you look at it, like, you'll see it says -110. That's we call that a 20-cent hold. So there's like, there's about 4% they're holding from you. Those numbers, in theory, if they were even and there's no hold, should add to zero, right? It should be +110, -110. So if you add those numbers together, the bigger it gets from zero, in theory, this is a quick way to do it, the bigger the hold is. So if you see -115, don't bet it. Go find somewhere else that will bet it, that you can find. Like, a little bit of price shopping goes a really long way. Like, you can make a lot more money by reducing the hold you're betting into.
By going to another book, checking out the odds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just having two or three. You'll be amazed at the difference.
Yeah.
The other thing, real quick, that I just want to point out, too, that's another really nasty tactic, is the delay. If you've ever make a live bet, you see that little delay?
Mm-hmm.
They pretend, and this is what they'll say, is that they want to prevent court-siding, right, which is people at the game who are watching it live.
Yes.
Because they'll have a little bit of delay, even if it's on a data feed.
I know.
There's a little 5-second
I never
delay.
do that, because it's like, I know what I'm seeing is 30 seconds behind. Like, for the live betting odds, that's just screwing you over.
Yeah, so so they'll say, like, even the sports books are a little bit behind if you're actually watching it in the stadium or arena, whatever. A couple seconds, but they're behind. And they don't want to get people in the stadium betting into something that's already happened. Like, this guy hits a home run, somebody bets home run, they can make money. But if you think about it, it's got to be such a small percent, right? Like, people actually doing that. They're way over defending themselves. But what actually happens, right, they'll say, it's, well, we can't prevent that. We can't have people betting into it, blah, 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 blah. Fine. Super small percent of people. But what they're actually doing is they're waiting to see how the odds change, right? You get this bet come in, and it just delays for everybody. And if the odds go against the bettor, they'll accept the bet right away, right? So if it goes from plus 120 to minus 110, they'll accept that bet instantly. If the odds go the other way, plus 120 to plus 140, right, meaning the bettor would get a better payout, they'll deny and say, sorry, we can't do it. Oh, sorry, I was kind of describing this backwards. Because I'm looking at it from the book's perspective.
Right.
If the odds get better for the bettor, so to speak, they'll accept the worse odds. They'll say, oh, went to 140, take the 120, right? If the odds get worse, they'll push, they'll push a new bet to you. So you say, you don't get, 20%, you don't get 1.2 anymore, you get 1.
Yeah.
And they'll just deny that the bet ever happened. So, like, the way I describe it is, like, imagine if you go to the grocery store and you pick up a carton of eggs and it's $4, and you go to the checkout, and by the time you get to the checkout, they say, sorry, it's $6. You can go put it back if you want, but the price is different.
Yeah. Right.
Most people will just go, oh, that sucks, I'll buy it. So then they know they'll just take it, and it's insane. Like, it shouldn't be legal. You should get like a maybe 1 second delay, but like, you'll see any book that waits longer than 5-6 seconds, just don't do business with them. Yeah. That's terrible, and they're screwing you over. I promise.
You can't probably say which ones.
No, I mean, I don't know which ones. I mean, like, a lot of times delays for different sports are different too. Like, different things are delayed different times, and other customers get different delays. If you're really good, they can individually change your delay. So, like, if you're not good,
so they can individualize it if you've had success?
100%. I've seen people that come through ours that have like a 24-second delay. I'm
not trying to, that doesn't shock me. I won't, say anything more. But
it shouldn't be legal. Like, it's insane. It's insane that they're allowed to do it. Like, it's unbelievable.
Well, it's like, I mean, it's a version of like day trading on the stock market, but there's and it's not as consequential, right? Obviously, but it's like as if that had even less regulation than it already does, and if people were able to do it so quickly on their phones. Well, anyway, Andrew, I really always appreciate when you call in. Thanks so much. And
yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Drew.
Have a good one.